In the history of modern warfare, there is a statistic that makes every air defense expert shudder. 4,000. That is the estimated number of surface-to-air missiles fired to destroy a single target over the course of 3 decades. The result? 0. Not a single hit. Not a scratch. That target was the State Route 71 Blackbird, the ghost of the stratosphere, the fastest air-breathing manned aircraft ever built. The story begins with a humiliating failure for the United States. On May 1, 1960, Francis Gary Powers' CIA U-2 spy plane was shot down over the Soviet Union at 70,000 feet. The Pentagon realized a brutal truth: altitude is not enough. To survive, you don't just need to fly high, you need to fly faster than death itself. This impossible mission was handed to the Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin's secret division led by the legendary Kelly Johnson. The requirement was simple but insane: build a plane that flies at 3 times the speed of sound. Mach 3. But at speeds exceeding 2,200 miles per hour, the enemy isn't the missile, it's the heat. Air friction at that speed heats the nose of the aircraft to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to melt a conventional aluminum airframe. Johnson had to use titanium, the only metal light enough to fly but strong enough to survive that hellish environment. And here is where history played its greatest joke. In the 1960s, the country with the largest and purest reserves of titanium was the Soviet Union, the very enemy this plane was built to spy on. The CIA had to pull off one of the greatest heists in history. They set up shell companies across Europe to quietly purchase thousands of tons of titanium from the Russians. The Soviets happily sold their precious metal for cold hard cash, completely unaware they were supplying the raw materials for the monster that would haunt their skies for the next 30 years. Building the State Route 71 was an engineering nightmare. Because the fuselage would expand several inches due to thermal expansion at Mach 3, engineers had to design the panels to fit loosely on the ground. This led to a unique quirk: the State Route 71 constantly leaked fuel while sitting on the runway. It was like a bleeding beast, dripping expensive JP7 fuel onto the concrete. But the moment it took off and hit supersonic speeds, the heat rose, the titanium skin expanded and locked tight, turning the leaking sieve into an impenetrable fortress, ready to challenge God himself. When the State Route 71 officially entered service, the skies over North Vietnam became its proving ground. Here, enemy radar operators witnessed a phenomenon that seemed to defy physics: a target moving so fast that their analog guidance computers couldn't calculate an intercept point in time. The rules of engagement for a Blackbird pilot were simple, yet required nerves of steel. When the missile warning light turns red, just push the throttle forward. Inside the cramped cockpit, the pilot and reconnaissance systems officer, RSO, wore full-pressure spacesuits, identical to those used by Gemini astronauts. They were flying at the edge of space, where the sky turned pitch black. When the SA-2 missiles launched, the pilots didn't weave, they didn't deploy flares. They simply rode the shockwave. The Soviet missiles, capable of Mach 3.5, would burn out of fuel trying to climb that high, detonating harmlessly miles behind the jet's tail. However, the danger wasn't just outside. The biggest threat was the plane itself. At Mach 3, the airflow into the engines had to be controlled by a movable spike. If this system failed, a violent event called an unstart occurred. The shockwave would be expelled from the engine, causing the aircraft to lose thrust on one side and snap sideways instantly. It was like having a blowout in a Formula One car at 300 miles per hour. The pilot's helmet would slam against the canopy, cracking under the G-force. If not corrected in a split second, the Blackbird would tear itself apart in the stratosphere. The ultimate test came in 1986 over Libya. After U.S. airstrikes on Tripoli, Major Brian Schul flew his Blackbird across the line of death to photograph the damage. This time, the enemy wasn't using old tech. They fired the SA-5 Gammon, a massive missile capable of Mach 6. When the warning system screamed, Schul knew they were being hunted by something faster than they were. He did the forbidden: he pushed the throttles past the manufacturer's safety limits. The J-58 engines roared, temperature gauges redlining. The Mach meter climbed, 3.2, 3.3, then 3.5. The jet vibrated violently, groaning under the thermal and aerodynamic stress. They were traveling faster than a rifle bullet. The SA-5 missiles clawed at the sky, but they couldn't close the gap on a target moving faster than the rotation of the Earth. Once again, the State Route 71 proved a simple rule: speed is life. Though built for war, the State Route 71 is best remembered for a story that perfectly captures the arrogance of American air power, known simply as the ground speed check. It happened over the California border. On a shared radio frequency, a small Cessna pilot timidly asked air traffic control for his ground speed. 90 knots, the tower replied. Moments later, a Twin Beach pilot, wanting to show off, asked for his speed. 120 knots. The race escalated when a Navy F-18 Hornet fighter jet screamed by and asked in a superior tone. 620 knots, the controller replied, confirming the fighter as the king of the block. But they didn't know that 80,000 feet above them, and State Route 71 crew was listening. With the calmest voice possible, the pilot keyed the mic. "Center, Aspen 20, can I get a ground speed check?" Silence fell over the frequency. Then, the controller's voice returned, not bored, but filled with awe. "Aspen 20, I show you at 1,842 knots." In one sentence, the pecking order of the sky was settled forever. No one else dared to speak. However, dominance came at a price. Operating the fleet cost over $200,000 per flight hour in today's money. As spy satellites improved, politicians in Washington decided the Blackbird was a dinosaur. In 1990, the program was killed. But before retiring to a museum, the Blackbird made one final statement. On its delivery flight from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., the pilots were given permission to let the horse run. The State Route 71 tore across the North American continent, dragging a double sonic boom from coast to coast. The flight time? 64 minutes and 20 seconds. To put that in perspective, a commercial flight takes over 5 hours. The average speed was 2,144 miles per hour. That record still stands today, a tombstone-defying time. Today, the State Route 71 sits silent in museums, its black titanium skin covered in dust. But its legacy is immortal. It is proof of a time when humanity dared to do the impossible. It flew through the most hostile environments, hunted by the deadliest weapons, and never, not once, did it let the enemy touch it. 4,000 missiles. 0 hits. The State Route 71 Blackbird remains the undisputed, uncatchable king of the skies.